Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
We hope you guys are doing well. And as always, just ask you guys to make sure you are subscribed, so hopefully you'll get some notifications to both EEARTS and also Evolutionary Energy Arts. Definitely different videos go up on both channels. We try to keep the news over on Evolutionary moving forward, and EEARTS will be more like the mysteries, the spiritual side of things. So I thought this was just an interesting thing to cover again a little bit more on its own. Why human brains were bigger 3,000 years ago, or even farther back into history, really, is what we're going to touch on. So this is from BBC.com. Our modern civilization may be the most advanced to ever exist on Earth. Well, right off the bat, nope.
No, I mean, the first thing the guys are telling me is, you know, all those movies we watch, all those shows where they show people in horse and carriage and they look to be doing things that are primitive. No, they're not. They really understand exactly how the world works. They understand how the plants work. They're more one with everything. And these people were far more awakened than we could imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah, our history is not what we've been told, as we have said so many times, and more people are beginning to realize this. Our ancestors had bigger brains than we do. Several thousand years ago, humans reached a milestone in their history. First known complex civilizations began to emerge, and again, that's just this time after the last flood and last cosmic disaster that led to another start over that happens on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder who's in charge of that anyway.
Oh yeah. Well, we've touched on that. The people walking around meeting in the world's earliest cities would have been familiar in many ways to modern urbanites today, but since then, human brains have actually shrunk slightly. The lost volume on average would be roughly equivalent to that of 4 ping pong balls. 4 ping pong balls inside your head. That's how much cranial matter has disappeared in this 3,000 years they're talking about. According to an analysis of cranial fossils, the shrinkage started just 3,000 years ago. But, you know, if we go back, and we are, you'll notice that it's much bigger than just that. There is much more. This is much more recent than we anticipated. We were expecting something closer to 30,000 years ago. Agriculture emerged between 10,000 and 5,000 years ago, although there is some evidence that plant cultivation may have started as early as 23,000 years ago. Sprawling civilizations full of architecture and machinery soon followed. First writing appeared roughly at the same time. Why, during this age of extraordinary technological development, did human brains start to dwindle in size? And again, we would have issue with that development because we've been way farther ahead. And when we're talking about the golden age, if you start going back 20,000 years ago, again, we were way farther ahead. They just chose, as Cindy was saying, to live in harmony with the planet itself. They didn't choose to go the route that we've gone and basically been like a virus upon the land. So that question had left a lot of researchers scratching their heads, and it also raises questions about what the size of a brain really reveals about animals' intelligence or cognitive ability in general. Many species have brains far bigger in size than ours, and yet their intelligence, as far as we understand it, is quite different. So the relationship between brain volume and how humans think can't be a straightforward one. There must be other factors too. What exactly prompts brains to get bigger or smaller over time in a given species is often also difficult to know. So this researcher Denisovans and his colleagues noted that human bodies have gotten smaller over time as well, but not enough to account for our reduction in brain volume. The question as to why this change occurred still hovers. And so in a recent paper they sought inspiration from an unlikely source, the ant. At first glance, or should I say squint, the ant brains might seem hopelessly different to ours. They are roughly 1/10 of a cubic millimeter in volume, or a third the size of a grain of salt, and contain 250,000 neurons. The human brain, by comparison, has about 86 billion neurons. And so I'm going to jump a little bit over there. That got me thinking, because I remember seeing a figure in the past. They say the human brain has about 86 billion neurons. How many stars are there in our particular galaxy? Well, they say about 100 billion. That's interesting, isn't it? Because that's almost like this, a galaxy is almost representative of a human. And then we look at the cosmic web, which connects individual galaxies, groups, and clusters by filament of dark matter surrounding large, underdense voids. All the stars are connected in a big network. And again, the human brain neural network, it's very similar. This is as above, so below. So I found that very, very fascinating in and of itself. Again, we live in a fractal reality. It's a fractal reality. What does that mean? Well, as above, so below, as within, so without. Everything that you see, every smaller unit is a reflection of the larger whole.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think is the most important thing is for us to return to simplicity. Simplicity is where everything can be at its fullest, and it just seems in these times we have so much clutter and we have so much just stuff around us, and when we're looking at that stuff on the external, that's translated to the internal, and that can actually cause a lot of chaos. So the simplicity of the ants working together, their neural network, and that says a lot.
It does. And it's interesting that they bring all that up. Some ant societies share striking similarities with our own. Amazingly, there are ant species that practice a form of agriculture in which they grow huge swaths of fungus inside their nests on purpose. They gather leaves and other plant material to use on their farms before harvesting the fungus to eat. So when Denisovans' team compared the brain size of various ant species, he found that sometimes those with large societies had evolved bigger brains, except when they had also evolved this penchant for fungus farming. It suggests that for an ant, at least, having a bigger brain is important for doing well in large society. But the more complex social systems with the greater division of labor might, in contrast, prompt their brains to shrink. This could be because cognitive capabilities that get divided up and distributed among many members of the group will have various roles to play. In other words, intelligence goes collective. So, everybody having, like their own smaller niche to do instead of thinking about things in the bigger scheme of things actually might end up shrinking brains. And there are still so many scientists that believe that our consciousness is just a byproduct of chemical reactions going on inside the brain itself. But consciousness resides outside of the brain. And it's something that goes on even when the brain is just breaking down and going back into being dirt, so to speak.
Right. There's so many things to think about it. I know a lot of you and myself have gone through times in my life where I just had to I got rid of, 90% of the stuff that I had. And strangely enough, as I got rid of stuff and as my life became a little more whole and complete with less things, it's like I had more understanding in the world around me. It's like for every bag of stuff I got rid of, I was allowed some really golden information into my soul that helped me grow a lot.
Neanderthals may have had larger brains, which they did. They had larger brains than we do. But environmental changes, they say, favored Homo sapiens. New research from Max Planck Institute suggests it was ecological changes that ended the Neanderthals. Neanderthals have generally had a bad press since they were discovered more than a century ago. Pictured as little more than apes, our closest human cousin has always been pictured as a stupid brute, almost twice our size and several times our strength. Wow, that's almost starting to sound like a giant, right? Who failed to adapt to circumstances as cleverly as Homo sapiens did. One widely taught example was that Neanderthals could not think ahead and therefore did not understand or perceive seasons and annual movements of animals, so did not plan for them. And as I'm reading this, it's like, yeah, it almost makes me want to puke because it feels so totally wrong.
You know, I mean, these beings, when I looked at them psychically, they're so much more developed, and their ability to telekinesis, read each other's minds. I mean, we can all do that right now to a much lesser extent. Well, these beings could do it to an amazing extent, so much so that they were kind of a threat.
Yeah, let me give you a picture of the environmental changes that I think they might have fell prey to.
Yeah, something that probably happened to them that they didn't have any choice but to step in, walk through, inhale all of this other poison that's going to break their systems down.
Yeah, it's called geoengineering. Geoengineering, which is a reality. It is geoengineering. And that word that we get the little Wikipedia on. Nothing to see here. So when Cindy looks back as to what happened to the Neanderthals, and not just them, also the Denisovans, because the Denisovans, again, bigger bodied, bigger brained, stronger than us, and they disappeared. Did we hunt them down? Did we hunt Neanderthals down? Were they just, even though they had bigger brains and were stronger physically than us, well, they weren't maybe smarter, and that's what happened to them? Or is what happened to them what's happening to humanity right now as we look at birth rates decline, sperm rates decline, life expectancy decline? History repeats itself.
And it just makes me so sad because when I did look back on them, they were very peaceful, and they did have an element of trust to them. And unfortunately, they trusted a very, very kind of beings that are predatorial to the point that it's really hard to fathom.
And who are you talking about there?
Well, not those that walk this planet.
Yeah, so...
I'm scared to say those vocabulary words sometimes.
Are you going to talk about the A word?
I could, but we actually did a whole video on that too, though, not too long ago, about how they felt about us. But yeah, I mean, when they did come through that time, to hear them and feel them talk about us is no different than, and it makes me feel guilty about talking about a pile of ants like it's not that much. I can actually hone in and feel that information that they look at us, and we are to be. To them, we are to be managed, we are to be grouped, we are to be delegated for their pleasure, and it just makes me kind of sad and cranky to think about it. But one thing that they have said is, well, we have learned to work more as one unit. We've come to some agreements that apparently you humans cannot come to. So I guess they feel if we were to behave in a different way, maybe we would have different results, even though they're the ones who are calling all the shots. They're the ones who are making all these manipulations for things to be in their favor. It's just so predatorial and sad to me.
Yeah, so basically what we're talking about is the Anunnaki.
Yep.
Yeah, this is the Anunnaki that came to Earth and basically set themselves up as the rulers of the planet. Now, if you read their stories, they were looking for the perfect worker race, and Denisovans and Neanderthals were not the perfect worker race. They were very in tune with the earth, and they had that knowledge of the mother that was just paramount in keeping them in such a secure place with the planet itself, and knowing when the storms were coming, knowing when tough times were coming, knowing when earthquakes were coming, knowing when there was going to be times of drought, and knowing when there was going to be times of flood. Just like animals today will leave an area before an earthquake happens. They could sense it just like the animals, because they were with one with the earth, like we, for the better part of society, are not in these days. And so, they were basically wiped out just as we see today, with, again, declining sperm counts, declining fertility, declining life expectancy. And then, of course, we have the WEF saying this may be the last, go around, the last generation or two of Homo sapiens. And then Homo sapiens will be basically the way of the Denisovans and the Neanderthals and so many others. But when we look back into history, we do see that things just overall were bigger. Of course, we have, what they've given us of the dinosaurs. And so many of those species were much, much larger than us. And of course, even mastodons, that were alive, just going back to before the Younger Dryas cataclysm. They were very, very large. We don't have anything that size in North America now. And then, of course, all the legends of these giants of all different sizes. Yes, 9, 10-foot tall giants, 12 to 16-foot tall giants, and then giants that are perhaps a quarter mile tall. That seems just inconceivable to us. But we've also shared that at one time Earth was much larger, as Earth is right now much smaller than it had been before when it was Tiamat. And then as Tiamat, there was that great destruction. And when you look at the legend of Tiamat too, again, everything has changed. And it's changed from the side of the victors. And it's all about these battles. Of course we have in ancient Greek, we have the Titans against the younger gods and all those battles. There's all these different. It's so fascinating, to read some of this, and people will just look at the Bible and not go any farther, but you need to go way farther because again, that's Reader's Digest condensed version. And you see this one's off of one of the tablets in the Enuma Elish. Tablet 1. When the heavens above did not exist and the earth beneath had not yet come into being, there was Apsu, the first in order, their begetter, the demiurge Tiamat, who gave birth to them all. They had mingled their waters together before meadowland had coalesced and reed bed was to be found. When not one of the gods had been formed or had come into being, when no destinies had been decreed, the gods were created within them. And so it goes on. And it's just fascinating that you have to go back to these legends, which are thousands and thousands of years before anything biblical, thousands of years. And yet still they're within the time frame of the Sumerian gods, of the Anunnaki. So you have to look at it as it's still from their point of view is the bottom point. It's still their point of view. It's just as time has gone on, they've hidden more and more and more. So when we look to Tiamat, what do we see? We see a beautiful goddess.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, beautiful, powerful, benevolent goddess energy that wants to help, that wants to nurture. And this is that energy that we are needing in society right now to help bring back the balance. We need to bring back that nurturing kind of energy and that understanding. And when we talk to so many of you, you guys understand how things really work, and fortunately you're kind of alone because of that, because you're tapping into many different lifetimes of information and knowledge that we are really not allowed to have right now. And if we do have it, our family members, they might love us, but they look at us different.
The humanoid form is not an unusual form. It's common.
It is. It's very common. I mean, that's what I see when I see the other entities. They might be shorter, they might be taller, they might have different color skin, but the commonality is the humanoid form. So
even when we look at like beings like the archangels, if you look at, say, Sandalphon, and when you describe Sandalphon, you said big, but human, and long white beard.
Yeah, just like that. It's true. It's true. They can look just like that. Some of them might even look like they have different lights. Like you can see the lights shimmering around their body. It's like their bodies are blinking. You know, it reminds me of like when you look up in the sky, and if you ever look up in the night sky, you do have this magical feeling. Well, some of those blinking lights, we could very well be looking at our own archangel, because their lights twinkle like that around their body.
And in some ways, what you just said, our own archangel. So think about that, archangel, you know, and a lot of people have made the connection between angel and angle, and then we start thinking about sacred geometry, but then I also start thinking about archetypes, archangel archetypes. In reality, as you trace all of us, our real higher selves, as you go higher and higher up, closer and closer to source, you'll find that it brings you into these enormous archetypes. Amazingly powerful, expansive, incredible intelligences that are almost, you know, they start to get on the border of hard to describe, because they get to be so immense and so deep. You know, their depth and their complicatedness.
Yeah, complexity and their depth and their knowing and their understanding. It can leave you a little bit speechless when you go and to read into one of these entities. It's much easier if you've had like a full meditation session and the information can flow freely, or you're in trance, the information can flow freely. But the way we have to look at things now is through our own filters, and that can leave out information.
And just because a being was enormous doesn't mean that it would have that type of wisdom as one of these amazing archangels, for instance. Because, there were physically enormous beings who were very much fourth density beings. And if you want to put them on a sliding scale, pretty comparable to any old human as far as the emotions, the integrity. You have the gambit. So again, like when you're talking about, say, a lot of the Norse gods, you know, these gods like Odin, Frigga, Tyr, Thor, you know, these are fourth density beings. And we, when we're sleeping and in between lives, we're fourth density being for the most part, unless you are, quote unquote, a fallen angel. And we were having this discussion with one of our brothers today, and there are, quote unquote, fallen angels that chose to fall, in the sense that they came down here to help straighten things out. And again, of course, the powers that be, which serve the dark energies of that AI Borg collective under the Draco, under the Anunnaki, the GG, and all the secret societies, you know, they want to make it like any of the angelic beings that you find on this realm now. They're all evil, demonic beings. No, I mean, what happens is a lot of beings come down here to try to rescue us and get us out of this muck and mire, try to free us from their system. And so, of course, they want to make them out like they're evil and blame everything on these, you know, fallen angels that are locked up to the last of days, and then we'll release them. Well, you know, ever since those legends came out and before that, the ways of the dark ones have been basically covering up the tracks of the real history, of the real reality, and they've turned everything upside down. So, you know, again, it's just like Orwell said, you know, good is bad, bad is good, you know, lies are truth, truth is lies. Well, that's their system.
Yeah, it's definitely turned upside down. And so it's really important as humans, we really need to remember where we're from. We need to remember all these things that we can do, because we are walking back into that amount of light. We're walking back into that amount of information, and we can do so many wonderful things, you know, but we do need to work together. We do need to set aside our differences about a lot of things and come together to kind of get ourselves out of this muck and mire that in some ways I feel consciousness, we wanted to have some kind of ability to step back and be away from the control system. So how much of this did we create as far as all of these new laws going on just for the fact so we could step back and be away from all of these laws? I kind of wonder about that.
Absolutely. So again, these beings, it's common. There's all sorts of beings out there that look very much like humans. Mm-hmm. And do the gods walk among us today? Did they ever walk among us? They have walked among us. And again, it's not that they are creators of planets or stars and star systems. No. It's again misunderstanding that these are beings. These are just beings. They're beings in many cases very much like us. More technologically advanced, absolutely, and in many cases, yes, more spiritually advanced, but not all the time. Definitely not when we get to, the dark controllers that are running the show now. Even though they have more technology than we do, in some ways, they are very, very much in the dark themselves, much more than we are.
Right. Some of these beings that came here to teach us in the Golden Age deliberately walked among us, but then as they were separate from us, they didn't want everyone to know who they were, but they walked among us to teach us things, to teach us how to live, to teach us about consciousness. And this was why so many of these entities do, when you see them in a statue form, they're wearing a mask. And I thought that was interesting when I picked up Thoth and he said, I walked amongst you. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, so Thoth doesn't really have an ibis head. No, he has a very, very human looking face. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't necessarily catch it. Of course, you might catch the actual physical size being very, very different. And again, these beings, just like us, we are multidimensional beings. So when we're out of the body, we're energy, and we look like an orb. I've seen all those photos of orbs with faces. Well, that's what we're like when we're out of the body. And we've gone over this, so I know many of you understand this because we've talked about this many times, but then there's always new people that are coming on board, and they're like, holy cow, that's so cool. I mean, you see, this is what people look like out of the body, because ultimately we're just consciousness. And no, these are not demonic beings. These are just people. The body is a temporary vehicle for having an experience in this 3D realm. And this is what we know. We are eternal. We don't have to rely on anybody to save us per se. Save us knowledge-wise, yes. And Yeshua came to save us knowledge-wise because we were in the dark. And he wanted to teach us about what we really are. And Source is right in there with us, and Source is in us. And look at, they're even laughing. This lady's like, oh, I went boom. I had a few too many wines at the party, and I went boom. And the orb is laughing like, oh, I remember those days.
And I do have a digital camera, and I want to try to get the pictures off on it. But for those of you who do have a digital camera, I want you to try going out into your yard, going out into the forest. Give yourself about 20 minutes of being quiet and calm and just asking anyone who wants to come forward, if you could take their picture, because I have so many pictures on my digital camera using that method. It's just crazy. And when you do get them on the computer and blow them up, their faces are huge, and some of them even look like fish. It's just so interesting. But yeah, you guys can try that too. I think you would have good luck and have a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And so why is it prohibited in certain traditions, controller traditions, to try to associate with spirits? Well, because you're going to uncover the fact that what you've been taught is a lie. And we still go on. We don't need any church. We don't need any pope. We don't need any religious authority to forgive us of anything. Mm-mm. That takes all their power away. That takes their ability to control away. And of course, they don't want to lose their power. So when we also look to the past and we see all these beings that are so much larger, the Earth was very, very different. Again, Tiamat was much bigger in size. The Earth that we have now is at best 2/3 the size of what it was originally, and everything has been getting smaller since. And then we also had interbreeding going on with other species, which is not happening now as well. So many of those species were larger. So as you keep interbreeding certain, dogs, if you look to dogs are very, very similar to humans in the sense that they've been created to achieve certain, specific goals. You have dogs that are big and protective to be just that. Think about like looking at different mastiffs, how big they are, and they would, guard areas. And then you have more working dogs. You got dogs that are ratters, that are small, so they could actually go down into burrows and go get varmints, so to speak, and vermin. Every dog is different, and it's bred as such. And so when we look to all the different types of human beings as well, many human beings come from different stellar origins, and there are also many bodies that we are inhabiting that have been altered with a purpose, because there is certain jobs to do.
Mm-hmm. Right, and with that understanding that they all come from a different area with different abilities too, and that's why so many of us have abilities that you might have that your friend doesn't have, or your friend might have abilities that are really, really strong in this area that are not strong for you in that area. But ultimately, as we all come together, these abilities accumulate into a whole bunch of power, and I believe that's why they want us to make sure we stay afraid of each other and separated and angry with each other too.
Absolutely. So I hope you guys found this interesting. Please do share your thoughts on all this. And we do want to thank our Patreons and those that are supporting us over on Ko-Fi. And also do check out Medicinal Foods. There's a link on top of every video. Use coupon code EEA. It does get you a discount. Lots of good stuff for detoxing and boosting the immune system. As always, guys, much love, God bless, and namaste.
Namaste.